Today we're going to show you how to paint the blazing skeleton from Dungeons & Dragons, the Ravenloft box set, using primarily the D&D official paints and some other products from the Army Painter. As you can see here, the model arrives in a see-through blue plastic, but before we get started, we're going to give the model a rinse in some lukewarm soapy water before priming the model using our color primer sprays. We're going to attempt a ghoulish green look with our model. So as you can see here, we begin by priming the model with color primer necrotic flesh. As always, you'll want to work in a well-ventilated space, and after giving the can a good shake with fluid motions, we spray the model from a distance of about 20 centimeters away. That's approximately 8 inches. The color primer sprays are a great way to get your models painted quickly, and since all of our primers are a 100% match to our Warpaints with the same name, it makes touch-ups a breeze. As you can see here, we're done coating the model. We turn the can upside down and spray until the pigment stops spraying from the nozzle. This ensures that our nozzle is cleaned out to prevent clogging for future sprays. Now that the model is dried, you can see that it's fully coated in necrotic flesh, which is the same color as zombie flesh from the D&G Paint Sets, as you can see here on the side of the bottle. Let's give it a go. This tutorial is all about basic techniques like washing and dry brushing. So to start off, we're going to grab our green tone wash and the D&D base coat brush. As always, give the paint a good shake. Apply it to your palette. Simply load the brush and then apply it to the model. The effect is almost instant. I've been careful not to get any of the green tone on the bone areas, but apart from that, we're just letting the wash do its job. A wash is a thinned down paint specifically designed to give the model a three-dimensional shading effect, which gives it a more realistic effect when you have the model on the tabletop. If you give the model only one coat of paint, the model will appear very flat. This actually makes the miniatures look more realistic. The flaming effect that we're trying to achieve here is a magical glowing kind of flame. As you can see, I'm still being careful to not get any of the green wash on the arms or the bones of the model, and you'll see why in a minute. This technique is very, very simple. To do it, it doesn't require a whole lot of skill, which is great for beginning painters. In the D&D paint sets, you will get 3 washes. You won't have the green tone that we're using here, as that comes from the standard Army Painter Warpaints range that you can find from most friendly local game stores. We're using the base coat brush, but any large size bristle brush will do fine here. Any brush that can hold a good amount of paint and its bristles will do just fine. That just about does it for the green tone. It's good to know that the washes do take a good bit of time to dry, so it's good to set it aside for 15 or 20 minutes before moving on to the next stages of the model. With the first wash dry, we're going to move on to the D&D brown wash. Again, we'll give it a good shake and we'll continue using the base coat brush. Then we'll begin painting all of the bone areas. Don't worry too much if you get some of the brown wash on the green areas. It's simply going to add extra depth to the model. When conceptualizing the scheme, we imagined that this skeleton had been sitting in a dungeon crypt for ages, only to be reanimated by some crazy wizard or evil necromancer, and then obviously set ablaze with green magical powers. The trick to washing is to be liberal with your application so that it's able to flow into the recesses. A common mistake is to apply too little, and you don't get the depth from this technique as it's designed to do. Obviously, you don't want to wash the model too much because the paint will pool, and if it does, just move the paint around on that area a bit to spread it out. And already our blazing skeleton is beginning to look pretty cool. Now that the model is all dry, we're going to move on to the highlighting stage, and for this we're going to be using zombie flesh and a dry brush. A dry brush is a flat brush that is perfectly designed for, well, dry brushing. Simply flicking paint over the raised areas so that the zombie flesh sits on the top and the green tone remains in the crevices. As always, give your paint a good shake, and here we're going to load the dry brush with some paint and just rub most of it off on a bit of paper towel here. So, just like this, flat brush strokes. The aim here is to get good coverage onto the edges of the flames without getting any of the zombie skin into the recessed areas. Here's a good example of that here. And we're just working up a good highlight. And now that we've covered all of the flames, we're happy with the result. We'll just give the brush a rinse before moving on to the next step. We're moving on to our second highlight. For this, we're going to use a mixture of zombie flesh and lawful white. With the dropper bottles, it makes it fairly easy to ensure that we have equal parts for our mixture. So now we're just going to mix them together. All war paints are easy to mix, water-based, and easy to work with. This time we're going for a much finer highlight, so we're only going to focus on the top halves of the flames, the most raised areas, with less pressure than before. Just easy, light flicks of the brush to pick out and build up these highlights. It's a super fast technique that requires very little skill or practice. After painting a few models with the dry brushing technique, you'll soon be a dry brush master. If you do get a little bit of this color onto the bony parts of the model, don't worry too much. We'll cover that up later. The next part to highlight is the bony areas, and for that we're going to be using the aptly named skeleton bone, of course. We are going to go back to the base coat brush. If you want to improve the flow of the paint, you can just add a little bit of water to your palette. Give it a good mix. What we're aiming for here is to only paint the most raised areas of the bone and leave that brown wash in the recesses. This is very simple to do. You're just going to color within the lines of the wash, tracing our skeleton bone on the most raised areas of the model. Thinning down the paint will mean that the paint is slightly more transparent. No worries, that just gives us more control over the highlights. We can go back and add a second coat to really reinforce those highlights. Skeleton bone is a great color to make the skeleton look aged and weathered, like it's been sitting in a dungeon motionless for decades. Now for the ribcage here, we're going to do a semi-dry brush using the base coat brush. Load up the brush and brush a little bit of the paint away on your palette, and then lightly feather the paint across the rib bones. We're going to do a similar effect here on the hand and on the spine here. Our next highlight will be to mix the skeleton bone and a bit of lawful white. So a drop of the bone and a drop of the white. And for this step, we're going to use our D&D detail brush. After giving the paints a good mix, we're just going to apply this mixture on the most raised areas, focused only on the top of the bones, as you can see here. Our blazing skeleton is really coming to life, so to finish this model off, we're just going to take a little bit of purple tone here from the standard Warpaints range and add a bit of it to the eyes here. Oops, a bit too much, don't worry. You can always clean it off with a swipe of your finger. So we're just going to be adding the purple glowing effect around the eyes, very simply. After we finish painting the model, we're going to give it a protective coat of Aegis Suit Satin Varnish. If your gaming group is as rowdy as ours is, it's always good to give it a protective coat. And there you have it, our blazing skeleton is done. And just look at how cool this model looks on the tabletop. Remember, you can find all of the products we used here from the official line of Dungeons & Dragons paint sets and the more expansive Army Painter range at your friendly local game store or at www.thearmypainter.com.